Arsenal of Green Club.
All kids love log.
'Tis the podcast log
Yes, log.
of the Star Wars Collectors Archive blog. Oh.
Yes, log.
Whenever the Star Wars Collectors Archive publishes a new blog, this podcast will log its contents, interview its writers, and go deeper. It's the Chivecast Blog Log Pod.
You, sir, are a mouthful.
Relax and just take life easy for a little while. Because it's only lasts for a little while.
Alright, it's a number 2 Blog Log Pod. It's so unlike our usual shows. If this is all you've ever heard, listen to a different episode. This is a quick shot, a one-shot, first shot. I'm not even recording this with Steve. I'm actually on Yehuda's couch. Yehuda! Say hi, Yehuda. Hi, Yehuda. That was a bad joke. Yehuda's good for that. Anyway, it's actually Shabbos, so he shouldn't be talking at all because I'm recording on a material. Shomer Shabbos, and apparently he does roll on Shabbos. So let's get to our interview with Scott Kinney, Cosmic Scott, who is known as one of the producers of the TV show that Steve was a star on. And we actually had a little bit of a blog post in which we talked about the show. We interviewed David Mandel as well. We're going to be interviewing him some other time too. So have a listen to the next Blog Log Pod. And maybe if you're lucky or unlucky, you hear again from this guy.
Hey.
All right, Steve. Well, we are here joined by the man who magically found you and put you in his TV show, Scott Kinney, a producer of Mark Hamill's Pop Culture Quest. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm an executive producer, one of the creators of the show. In fact, I kind of started the whole thing, but we can get into that later. But there's four other executive producers on the show as well.
You know, our podcast is mostly, almost exclusively about vintage Star Wars collectibles. And but we're also interested in collecting in general as kind of like a theme. And I think that your show is the first successful show about collecting I've ever watched. It's not about money. I mean, you hardly ever talk about money on your show. Most of the other ones, it's always like, can you believe how much this is worth, how much that's worth? It's all like narrative-based. It's about collectors. And I've even gotten to the fact that Mark Hamill's in it. I mean, that's the thing that everybody knows that's cool. But even without Mark Hamill, it's just so refreshing to see a show where you really appreciate what a collector is. So I cannot recommend it enough. You know, I signed up for the Comic HQ or whatever center. Mm-hmm. How do people actually watch it? Because people have been asking me, like, how do I see it? What's the way the people should see it, Scott?
It's comic-conhq.com, and if you just type in Comic-Con HQ on Google, it'll probably pop up number one. Comic-Con HQ is a streaming network, and so you can watch it online. You can watch it through Amazon Prime. You can get it on your Roku box, a smart TV, things like that, Amazon Fire. So it's a streaming network exactly like Netflix, but it's not it's not as big as Netflix. It's just a startup Netflix, but it's the whole network is geared around anyone that would go to the San Diego Comic-Con would potentially want to watch any of the original programming or the TV shows, the library TV shows and movies that they have on there.
So how did you start it? How did you manage to get a show like this on the air, so to speak?
Really, I'm a toy collector, and I collect mostly vintage toys. I rarely pick up anything new. Sometimes I do, but it's kind of an obsession, 70s, 80s toys. I really collect my childhood, and my childhood was dominated, by large part by Star Wars from elementary school through junior high. Actually, I kind of got a little bit early in the 90s. I started collecting toys again, but not seriously, going to KB and picking up Thundercats for 99 cents or 3 for 99 cents or whatever, when they were blowing all that 80s stuff out in the early 90s.
Well, it's all about KB with you two guys, huh?
Yeah. It was great. I mean, for a guy that was just out of college and, making very little money, I could go to KB and get a bag full of toys for like $10. It was nuts.
Yep.
And where was this? Where'd you grow up?
Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, Tulsa. All right.
As, flash forward, or flash back 2 or 3 years here, I had seen collecting shows like American Pickers, Storage Wars, Toy Hunter, things like that. And I thought, it'd be neat just to make the show a little bit more geared towards just more of the collector's angle than the guys that, acquire it and sell it angle, which is really, how most of those shows go.
Right.
And so anyway, I just kind of had this idea. I had written up a proposal, like a pitch. I had been working in Hollywood on the feature film side, working on a bunch of films that never got made. We got some set up at studios, but never got to the green light. I actually worked with Mark Guggenheim on a film, which was he was the screenwriter, and that was a lot of fun. But anyway, on the TV side, I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anyone in the reality TV world or anything. And a friend of mine, Darren Moorman, independent film producer, we'd become friends, and I just kind of threw this idea out to him about doing hey, let's do a toy collecting show or a reality show, but, about toy collecting or whatever. And he said, well, my friend Howard Kazanjian, I was like, Howard Kazanjian. I know who that Howard Kazanjian. Yeah, it's like I already knew who it was when he said that. He didn't have to explain. He was like, he's the producer of Return of the Jedi. And I was like, yes, I know. And he said, well, he was my mentor. I guess Darren grew up near Howard, and Howard kind of mentored Darren in the film business. And he said, let's pitch it to my friend Howard. And I was like, yeah, great, So I pitched the show to Howard over the phone, and Howard liked it and asked me to write up a kind of a proposal, outline for the show, and I did. And we went back and forth on it. He had ideas, Darren had ideas, and then at a certain point, I guess Howard was happy with it and said, I think my friend Mark Hamill would be a perfect host for this show.
This deal gets better all the time.
I know, it does. And, and so it was the opposite Lando Calrissian.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, that'd be awesome. Because, again, I knew that Mark, not only, that he was, Luke Skywalker in the Joker and a million other animation voices and everything else that he's done, I knew that he was a collector. I'd known that for years. Because I read fan magazines, and I'm one of these guys that read Comic Buyer's Guide and the Comics Journal and all those magazines back in the 80s.
Right.
I had read interviews with people like Mark, and he'd been a comic book collector, and he was actually a bit of a collector before he even did Star Wars.
Right.
And a fan of Japanese anime and manga and things of that nature. Godzilla, definitely, he's a big Godzilla fan. And so it was just like the perfect kind of team, came together. Mark was very into the show, and he actually drove the show more in the direction of, let's stay away from any buying or selling. Let's stay away from, the value aspect of it. He's not opposed to someone trying to find out what it's worth, or
right.
An audience, assuming that the audience member would be curious, well, what's a thing like this worth?
Right.
We're not opposed to that, but that's not what the whole show's about. It's not the sort of in the world of reality shows. That found treasure is a big component of a lot of those shows, and every episode kind of revolves around finding some hidden treasure in this a barn full of junk.
Right. I think
whether.
Yeah. Well, I think a good counterpoint, I sort of think your show is the sort of anti-Toy Hunter. I mean, I like Toy Hunter all right, but the first episode of Toy Hunter, there's a scene where he finds a rocket Fett, and in the episode 7 that Steve stars in and David Mandel's in, and we're going to talk to him later, in your episode, you're looking to find a rocket Fett, and it's the whole conceit that you came up with is let's find somebody who has one, and that's fun. And the way that they did it on Toy Hunter was that he found one in a box across from the Earth Toy Mall in Cincinnati. Everybody knows that it was put in the box. It wasn't actually found. It was actually purchased like 3 weeks before. And they get to show the rocket Fett, and then it's sold at the New York Comic-Con. I was actually there when it happened. It was sold to the guy who started Tap Out Clothes. It's intriguing, but it's kind of empty. Like I don't.
It's a completely different narrative.
Right.
When I originally wanted to do this episode, I wanted to do an episode about toy urban legends. I actually wanted to get into also the I don't know if you remember or if you know about it, the Wonder Bread He-Man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's mentioned in the show briefly by the puppet thing. Oh, there's a puppet in the show, by the way. If you haven't seen it, there's a very cute puppet, which the whole time, I know it's not Mark Hamill who does it, but I always think that it must be him, and he must be also a ventriloquist, but...
He wanted to do the voice originally, or he had discussed it. As people listening to this podcast know, he's done hundreds and hundreds of voices for animated shows for decades now. I mean, he's played characters on all kinds, X-Men, Spider-Man, all kinds of Justice League, Superman, and he forgets. Like, people will say, you were the voice of such and such. And he's like, was I? Oh, yeah, I kind of remember that. He's just done so many of them.
Yeah.
And he actually loves doing them. So we did discuss him doing the voice of the puppet. But actually, Dan Milano is the voice for Pop, and Dan did a TV show called Greg the Bunny.
You get the blah. That's one of my favorite jokes. Is the vampire who's told by the studio executives he has to say "I," but he doesn't know how to pronounce it, so he says "I get the," and so he goes "I get the blah," and like all the time I quote it. So I mean that show's a cult hit, and I'm sure he gets it all the time. But that is one of my favorite TV jokes that's been kind of buried. Even on YouTube, it's not that easy to find. I get the blah, but. And
Dan's great. He's a lot of fun. He also did a show called Warren the Ape, which is a spinoff of Greg the Bunny, I guess. I'm not 100% sure about that. I think Warren the Ape was in Greg the Bunny. But anyway, I binge-watched Warren the Ape before I met Dan, just to get a sense of his humor. And I was like, man, I wish we could do a show like that. I mean, because it's out there. It's really out there.
Right.
But he was really great with Mark. And Mark, he and Dan had actually been looking for something to do together for some time. And so this kind of came together. And also one of the challenges of the show is that Mark has been since we started doing this. We started working on this show before Star Wars was even a thing. I mean, George Lucas hadn't even sold Lucasfilm to Disney yet.
Wow.
Star Wars 7 and 8 wasn't anywhere on the horizon, and then that deal happened, and then
all
shortly, as you know, thereafter, Star Wars 7 was happening, and then Mark, Carey, and Harrison were back in the picture, and it was Mark was off filming 7 when we were in our pre-production phase, and we had to wait till he got back from filming 7. Like he took 1 week vacation, and then we started filming, hit the ground running. So it was, the whole thing got put together really fast. I mean, it took forever to happen, and then once it did happen, it just all kind of was like a collision course.
I didn't think it was possible for me to like Mark Hamill more than I already did, but because of all the things, and I've read those interviews with him talking about being a collector as well, but there's like two things that happen with your show. You learn about all these other collectors, like Steve and like Brandon Allinger and like, a lot of other people, and then you also learn about Mark Hamill, because he lets in enough of himself. It's not overbearing. It's not like, what do I do? But like you really feel connected to him in a way that I've never felt before, like through the show.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
another added aspect of it where I'm like, I thought after watching the Ice Bucket Challenge video where he's like hanging out with the Kinks, I'm like, okay, he can't get cooler than this. Oh no, he can, and it's through this show. So yeah, that's.
And he Mark, what's great about him is he's like a living, breathing, walking encyclopedia of pop culture knowledge. I mean, if he doesn't know it, if you introduce him to some item or some factoid that he finds interesting, he latches onto it and he really wants to know as much as you know about it. I went at one point to a certain place to look at with Mark for a potential location, and I told my daughter was with me and her boyfriend, and they were from out of town with me, and I said, just wait here. I'm going to go look at this thing with Mark real quick, and then I'll be right back. So Mark and I, once we got together in this place, we started talking about the canceled Kenner alien line from '79. Mm-hmm. And 30 minutes later, we were still talking about it because he was fascinated by it and wanted to know more about it. And so we just talked, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Hey, Mark, my daughter's actually out in the car." And he goes, "Oh," and so he just came right out there with me to the car, and met her and had signed a comic book, a Killing Joke comic that she had with her, and took a photo, and so it's just the way he is. He actually is more interested in collectibles and pop culture knowledge and comic books and things like that than he is almost anything else that I'm aware of.
Wow. Yeah, and one of my favorite things was getting to hear Mark Hamill talk about Steve's collection, because
one of these things that just like I still can't quite process that actually happened.
Yeah,
it's really, really bizarre to me, but I don't know.
Because one of the running jokes on our show is that we make fun of Steve's collection all the time because he collects the B-Wing pilot. And here's Mark Hamill himself being like, wow, that's cool. I'm like, all right, Steve, you officially won this joke.
Sure, I think I had a call with you guys. You was at that stage where you were just looking for someone that had a rocket-firing Boba Fett, and I broke the news that I did not. And I said, well, I have this other stuff. And I said that I was in Southern California. And then, months later, Tim, I think, emailed me within a couple days saying, hey, like, would you be up for doing something this weekend or this day or whatever it was? And it's just one of those funny things. Like, I actually thought about this. It's like, it was kind of like the 1960s Batman movie where they just had to use something that was local. So they went to Santa Barbara to film the Batman sequence on the pier, and that was me.
Yeah.
Well, it's so awesome.
It actually worked out because you did an excellent job of introducing us to the concept of prototypes and first shots and things of that nature from your collection, because that was one thing that we actually just kind of let organically happen in the episode. Was to allow Mark to discover for himself what the story was. Mm-hmm. And that was the whole premise of, I didn't want to be fake about it and pretend like Mark already knew all this stuff. He actually didn't know everything. And we did other episodes like that where we kind of let Mark just walk into the room or meet the person for the first time and let him kind of just discover what they're all about. And I actually thought that worked well. I don't know how other people felt about it because, but to me, we created the stories almost like a true reality show. Like, hey, Mark, in that room over there is this guy that has hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Hollywood props. Just walk in there and we'll film it, you know. There's very little prep.
Preamble, yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it's great because it comes across authentically. Like I remember that scene where he walks in, he's pointing at all the different corners. You can tell it wasn't cooked, and yeah, it definitely works.
You know, with the Boba Fett story, I wanted it to play like a mystery. You know, I was able to go to, obviously, the Star Wars Collector's Archive site and read the whole story. I mean, I could read it right there. It's on the website.
Yeah.
But that's no fun. Like, why, you could just do an episode where a guy reads the article about the whole story.
We may have done that before.
Yes. That's sort of what this podcast is, actually, Scott. That's what our show is just basically reading stuff from the archive and telling people, hey, did you know this?
Exactly. Yeah, but and throw some jokes in there or whatever. But so I wanted it to play out like a bit of a mystery. And we were fortunate that we were able to go to Blast from the Past in Burbank,
right?
And let Mark go in there and just ask them if they had one and film it. And there was no prep on that. They didn't know Mark was coming. We sent someone into the shop like 5 minutes before Mark got there and said, "Okay, here's the deal. A celebrity's going to come in your store, and some cameras are going to follow him. And just if you could sign these papers, then we're good to go." And they were like, "Okay." And so literally, Mark gets out of his car and walks in the store. And what's funny is, we realized that when Mark got out of his car and the people that were strolling by on the sidewalk in front of the store stopped and turned towards him, I thought, we're on a timer here.
Yeah.
This could get out of hand. Because these people instantly recognized Mark and instantly, turned, that's Mark Hamill, and started, he's gravity pulling them in.
Right.
Get inside the store. So we kind of hurry in the store, and unfortunately, the shop owner, I forget the man's name, he's a big Mark Hamill fan. He had called in sick that day, and his wife was there.
Oh. That's like a nightmare that you'd have a dream about. That's so funny.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And his wife, when Mark was coming in, I think his wife had, picked up the phone and was calling her husband, you won't believe it, that kind of a thing. So, that was unfortunate for him. But, the people in the shop were game, and they made it a lot of fun. And, of course, the guy that was at the register, I forgot his name. I think it might be Travis. I'm not sure. The guy at the register actually had some decent info on the rocket-firing Fett, which was cool. He knew some of the backstory. He didn't know all of the details, but he knew that it was never released.
Right.
And we didn't script any of that, that it was a prototype, and it was like, cool, this guy fills in part of the story and allows us to kind of carry it forward in this real kind of way. So that was neat.
Well, that was part of the suspense for, a toy collector, because he said that somebody choked to death on the rocket. And I'm sitting there being like, "Gow, I hope they don't leave that in. That's not entirely Battlestar Galactica." And so, I had all this stress, they're not going to pooch this, are they? And then later in the episode, David Mandel comes on and he tells the whole story accurately, actually in more detail than I've ever even heard it before.
I think so. I think I learned a couple things with David too.
Yeah. So that was very exciting for me, because he was on the trail of saying it right, but I thought, I can't believe they're going to do a whole show about the Fett and not even say the correct information. But you did, and that's part of what makes it so much fun, is that journey. I mean, beyond the fact that Luke Skywalker narrates the whole thing and is the host of the whole thing, there's also Steve's episode, which is all about Star Wars stuff. But everywhere there's little Star Wars stuff. There's an episode about Pinball Wizard, and they talk a little bit about the arcade game. But a real big one is actually the interview with Brandon Allinger from the Toy Store of London. And that's somebody, I've been on panels with him before at Celebration, or I've introduced panels with him before. But that was a great story, learning about him. And then he would, of course, write the most recent Macquarie book with David Mandel.
With David, yeah.
So that's really exciting. The whole thing with Gentle Giant, which is a little bit more modern, but still kind of like how they make toys, and then a whole bunch of props, and then there's an interview with Howard Kazanjian. How do you pronounce his name? Kazanjian. Kazanjian. Yes, I know who he is. Yeah. I just can't pronounce his name. But yeah, and that
his name actually looks more difficult than it sounds.
Yes. So there's really a lot to see, and all the episodes are under 15 minutes or around 15 minutes, so it's really enjoyable.
And Howard, you get the flavor of Howard. Howard appears, of course, in the series, and you get a little peek into Howard's home, just a small peek. We didn't see everything Howard actually had. I mean, Howard has a lot of Star Wars props.
That's in Brandon's episode, right? The prop store episode.
It is.
Yeah.
Because Howard is part of Brandon's story. He played a small role in in Brandon becoming the president of the prop store L.A., which is spun off of the prop store London.
Right.
But Brandon is kind of like, he is kind of a real world Indiana Jones of props. I mean, he's this kid that kind of went out and started doing it, with the help of his parents at a young age, and then made it his career. And Brandon himself, you see in the episode, he has some of his personal items are in the episode. He has a Stormtrooper blaster and a X-Wing pilot helmet and various other things. Oh, what was it? The mock-up of the Jabba's sail barge.
Right.
Yeah, the wind sail.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, those are things that are in his office. I mean, that's his stuff. And he's just a fun guy. I enjoyed being around Brandon. I enjoyed talking to him, online too. He's a cool guy. He's very knowledgeable. And I would love to live in his world full time. I imagine he's just like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that a lot of people get to go inside of the prop store, but it is a huge warehouse full of props. I mean, when you walk in, they have a showroom that we filmed the ship, the Nostromo from Alien. We filmed that in the showroom.
Right.
And you can see in the cases around there, you can see little glimpses of some of the other props. Those are all in the collection of the Prop Store LA. That's their permanent collection. The Nostromo's in their permanent collection in that showroom. But in the back, you open this door, and I think there's some behind-the-scenes footage of that. I can't remember what was in the episode, but it's literally a warehouse, and every stacked to the ceiling, these ceilings are, 15 foot high of props. And, it was just, it blew my mind. And I would see, again, you walk around and you see things, you're like, oh, that's one of the gremlins, or whatever, it's just crazy. And you knew it's the real thing because it's got all these wires and cables and stuff, connected at the bottom of it, It's like the whole thing. And I was just like, this is incredible. I don't know what would it be like to come to work here every day. I'm really enamored with this Return of the Jedi plastic or vinyl wallet that I have in a pencil case.
Okay.
For no really good reason other than they're just weird.
Right.
And I was actually digging through a box of things today, and I found the wallet. I was like, oh, there it is, and I went and put it in a display case, because I like it. I think it's cool. I like odd things that I guess I've seen Star Wars figures and ships and toys over and over and over, and I've bought and owned so many of them that I'm always looking for the new item. Like, is there some Dixie cups that I haven't seen yet, or something new, a poster, a Coke poster that I haven't seen.
Right.
I kind of to me it's like going back in time and enjoying the experience all over again. I mean, I recently was at a big outdoor antique festival way down in South Texas, and I walk into this tent. It's literally a tent in a field, and this guy has 4 of the Burger Chef Star Wars posters, the painted ones that were really cool from A New Hope. He has them in frames, but it looks like he's carried them around a long time, and they're all warped and wrinkled. And he had I can't remember what the price he had on them. I was like, man, for these all warped, wrinkled posters? And he goes, oh no. And he gets in this box, and he's got like tubes and tubes of
a whole stock of them. Those are just old the display copies.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I bought 4 of those, and I remember I didn't have all of them as a kid, but I know I had a couple of them hanging on my wall, my wood-paneled wall, as a kid. And, stuff like that, to me, I enjoy, finding new and different, or rediscovering memories, I guess is the best way to put it.
Now, Steve sent me a picture of, speaking of things that haven't really been seen before, a really weird assemblage of accessories. So we're going to have pictures up on the show, on the sort of enhanced version of it. But I don't even really know, Steve, how would you describe what Scott sent us in these pictures? Because it is very singular.
So it is like, it's a stockpile of vintage like figure accessories, from lightsabers to Ewok staffs to blasters and then also like accompanying paperwork. So we don't know the whole story behind this, because it's not like anything we've really seen before.
Yeah, that was okay. So the collection that I got was pretty commonplace. I mean, there was nothing rare in it or whatever. But what was nice is it had complete ships and things like that. I had a complete Y-wing, complete Falcon. So I bought this collection. Everything was very well played with, well loved, but it always is kind of unique when the kid managed to keep all the parts to the ships and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was probably a tell that there was something else that was going to be in there. And so I didn't know it was in there when I acquired it. I literally, it was boxes and boxes, and they were really dusty, like they'd been in storage forever. And, it was one of those things where it was like, I opened a couple boxes and said, yeah, this is good stuff. I'll take it, and then so when I got it aside and started opening the boxes within the boxes, there was a shoe box, a Nike shoe box inside there. And inside the shoebox, there was a piece of folded paper and 4 white boxes, and then there was another little, like a jewelry box or something in there. Mm-hmm. And so I opened the piece of paper, and it said Kenner Products at the top, and it was a price list for replacement parts. I think one of the what's the Kenner baking thing where you make the little cakes in it. You had like replacement bulbs for that.
Easy Bake Oven?
Yeah.
Easy Bake Oven, yeah.
Yeah.
Had strawberry shortcake accessories that you can buy. And then there's like this weird line that's like Star Wars weapons or something like that, $1. And it wasn't singular, it was plural.
Yeah.
So, I guess for $1 you could buy Star Wars weapons, and it was so non-specific. It didn't say lightsabers or blasters or anything. It just, you can see from the picture, it's just sort of this weird deal. So I thought, well, that is interesting. That piece of paper I thought is pretty cool. So then I opened one of the little white boxes, inside, and it's full of weapons. And I was like, what? And I literally like poured them out on the table immediately, like, no way. And so I then poured the rest of them out, and I just couldn't fathom what it was. I mean, it was, I can't remember, there's like maybe 8 R2 pop-up R2 sabers in there. 6 or 7 of Man-O-Man staffs. There's one of the Ewoks line staffs, 6 or 7 of those. There's black Imperial blasters.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff. Yoda canes, Yoda snakes, Yoda belts, Palace blasters, TIE fighter blasters. I mean, it's just all kinds of just different, just in a wide assortment of weapons. And so I was like, this is amazing. I can't believe it. So this kid apparently bought 4 or 5, boxes of these from Kenner, and didn't do anything with them. Kept them in the boxes. And then the other odd thing is that he did a hand on notebook paper, a hand in pencil drawn inventory. Of all the weapons.
Yeah.
So that was wow.
And he drew them. He drew a picture of what the weapon looked like. And some of them he didn't know what the weapon was. Like on the pop-up saber, he wrote like 8 clubs, 8 green clubs.
Have you seen the movie?
There's no pop-up saber or R2 in his collection. So, I mean, he didn't even... But what's weird is the entire inventory was there. It was not spread out amongst the collection. Because there was a ton of loose figures in there. And there was some weapons, but not all of them had their weapons. And he didn't take the weapons and add them to the figures. He kept them all in these boxes. And so the inventory count still matches.
Stories about prototypes are fun and everything, but this kind of, I kind of wish that you'd make a show just about Star Wars collectors, because I bet there's lots of, that's part of what our show is finding out weird finds. And, we had a whole thing on with some collectors who came up nearby here, and they found they bought out a collection from a guy who used to collect tiki mugs, and there's this whole story. Right. And it was a lot of fun. Actually, that you made me think of Isaac, because Isaac Lev was one of the people who was in that find, and he's the world's biggest welcome back Cotter collection. So what is your other 70s and 80s, like, is there one other area you really focus on for 70s and 80s stuff?
I think my most complete collection outside of Star Wars is Shogun Warriors.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a Mattel line that was imported from Japan under that banner. It was never Shogun Warriors overseas, but I got one for Christmas in, I think, 77, and that was, of course, the Christmas that every kid wanted Star Wars toys, but there was none to be had.
Right.
And so you got all these substitute space toys for Christmas in 1977. I got like a Space 1999 Eagle from the TV show. I got a Shogun Warrior figure, and some other odds and ends. They're all space related, like Micronauts. But we all wanted Star Wars. So literally when I got Star Wars toys, I got them earlier than the next Christmas. They played in those ships. My Star Wars, figures took over the Space 1999 Eagle because there wasn't a Millennium Falcon yet.
Yeah, right.
It was just I remember the first ones I actually got. The first Star Wars toys ever were the original carded figures. I didn't get any of the ships until later.
Huh. And that's one of the things that one of the earlier episodes of your show, you have a whole thing about a Shogun collector, but what I love is that you really feature what happened to be my favorite toy growing up, which is the Shogun Godzilla.
Oh,
So I'll share the story with you because I think it's pretty clear that you love that toy too. So first of all, the only picture of me as a kid with a toy is me at 5 years old playing with Shogun Godzilla with this awesome Silver Surfer poster behind me. It's like the coolest picture of me. And then, and we've always had it at my family's house, but the problem is the thing that sticks out the tongue on the back, like broke off, the handle, so it's really hard to get the tongue to stick out. And I lost the shooting fist probably a decade ago. Now, my dad moves down the street from me from Boston to Rochester, New York, and in the middle of the whole move, like, he didn't prepare anything. Like, he didn't even, like, pack up his clothes or his medicine. Like, it was the biggest mess. Like, it was just packing trucks filled with junk and toiletries and, like, old napkins, and it was just terrible. But after about a week of living there, of living here, he just goes in his pocket and goes, Skybar, I found this. And he hands me the shooting fist to the Godzilla toy, and it was so unbelievably great. I don't even think I've told the story on the show before, Steve.
No, I've never heard that. That is awesome.
Well, it's not a Star Wars toy, so I haven't given myself license to. And then it's amazing because the National Toy Hall of Fame is in Rochester, and they have two of these Godzillas like on display, and it seems like it's finally getting the respect it deserves as just the coolest toy. So
yeah, it is. It's a great toy, and I didn't have one. My neighbor had one, and so of course I had Dragoon, the red one, so we were able to fight the monsters or whatever. But the thing about to me, what's great about that period of toys is that Star Wars actually created this incredible explosion in science fiction and fantasy toys. I mean, suddenly you were going from like Big Jim, G.I. Joe, to all of these incredible space toys. And I love that whole period. And I know a lot of other Star Wars collectors collect toys of that era as well, because you didn't always get the Star Wars toy for your birthday that you wanted. You had a TIE fighter on the list, and you got Buck Rogers' ship.
So be it.
Okay, are you ready for the Soviet lightning round?
Yep.
Okay. What is your favorite bad line of dialogue from any Star Wars movie?
Sounds like a cop-out, but I don't think there's any bad lines of dialogue in Star Wars films. I love the Star Wars. I was one of the people that have always loved Jedi and been a defender of Jedi. It's like, what's wrong with Jedi?
Oh, we're right there with you. We are right there with you. We are 100%. To me, Jedi's number one. So okay, all right. So
okay. So I failed that one.
No, that's okay. So if the Great Colorado Fire happened and you had to grab one Star Wars item from your collection to be saved, what would it be?
Probably my double telescoping Luke.
Okay, and how about any item from your collection, Star Wars or not?
I'd be tempted to grab my Rodan.
Okay, so that's some kind of Godzilla-related thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's a Shogun Warriors Rodan figure.
Okay. Do you have a Grail item that you are looking for, a Star Wars Grail item? Like, what's the one thing, if someone could help you find it, you'd be most excited to find?
I really want an early bird set. I would love to get someday. That is on my bucket list of Star Wars toys.
Okay. Well, maybe someone's listening and will want to thank you for making a great show, and will contact you and give you a good deal because.
I would hope so.
Yeah, I have some great weapons for trade.
Yes. Do you want some green clubs? Because
an arsenal of green clubs.
Yeah, that's right.
And then finally, the last is the most existential question that we have. And that is, if you were an item of vintage Star Wars memorabilia, it doesn't have to be a toy, it could be any, which one would you be?
I think if I could be any character, I'd probably be Blue Snaggletooth. Only because I think he's maybe the coolest looking of the Cantina denizens. But personally, I love the Cantina scene, or the Cantina play set, and I love all the characters.
Right.
So I probably played with that set the most, as a kid, and loved all of the alien characters. And so to this day, I have just a fondness for all of the Hammerhead and Greedo and the rest of them. I mean, I just love looking at that box art.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So I would love to live in that world.
Yeah.
Especially
as a Blue Snaggletooth.
Yeah.
Yeah, the safe toy version of that world. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's funny because Steve is starting his own podcast about like movie memories of people seeing Star Wars, and I'm pretty sure that most of them, if anybody is over the age of like 40, they're all going to say the Cantina, the Cantina, the Cantina, the Cantina, the Cantina, because almost everybody I've ever talked to has just said like, that was it, that's why I'm in it, that's why I love it, that was the thing. Well, thank you so much for making the show and for making Steve a bigger star than he already is, and allowing the most modest man in the hobby to get an ego. He has to put up with mine a lot, so.
He was great. I think, Stephen, you were great on camera, and your collection's awesome, and so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
No, it was awesome to be a part of it. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Cool, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, sounds good.
Have a good night.
All right.
All right, that voice you hear is my brother. He's running around. He's actually putting up blinds for me. I am no longer on Yehuda's couch. He fell asleep immediately after I recorded the intro. He actually fell asleep half off his couch, and then like his butt was off the air, but then his feet were on a different couch. It was quite amusing. I actually have to get ready to record episode 81. Whatever the next episode is with Steve, we're going to record here in the morning. So stay tuned, Space Freaks. I hope you enjoyed this blog pod and Scott Kinney's great work. And seriously, at least sign up for the free trial. Watch Steve's episode. It is some of the best vintage content that has ever aired on television. No, it is the best vintage content that has ever aired on television. And as a matter of fact, I'm just going to include a clip from it here. This is Mark Hamill saying thank you to Steve. I'm going to play it 6 times in a row. That is Luke Skywalker thanking Stephen B. Danleys.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Stephen.
So go check it out. All right. Oh, wait, what do I say instead of Wampa Wampa on this thing? I forget what I say.